Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I telling the story of Cass Elliott buried one of her biggest secrets. No one knew who her child's real father was. It wasn't until years later that Elliott's bandmate Michelle Phillips found out, and it was the biggest shock of all. Elliott was the breakout star of the folk rock band The Mamas and the Papas, but her onstage talent covered up her tragic true story full of unrequited love, embarrassing career mistakes, and dangerous diets. Her struggle with her self-image followed her until the day she sang her last note with one mean meth that still haunts people today. Ellen Naomi Cohen was born in Baltimore, Maryland, in September 1941. Her family was Russian Jewish, and they had a hard time financially as a child, but she always seemed like she was destined for greatness. She had a beautiful personality and a lot of talent, but she also had her demons. Even when she was young, Cass struggled with her weight and the shame that came with it. In high school, she found a community that helped her talents soar. She fell in love with theater and performing in front of crowds. She chose the stage name Cass Elliott by reportedly borrowing from the famous actress Peggy Cass and a friend who had died. This alter ego gave her the confidence to do what she did, even though it was risky because she had found her true talent. Cass dropped out of high school and moved to New York to try to become an actress, but Broadway didn't treat her well. After losing out on a role to the unknown Barbara Strand, Cass turned to singing in the hopes that it wouldn't break her heart like acting had. She was horribly wrong. When she started singing, Cass had some success. Between 1962 and 1964, she formed two bands, the Big Three and later the Mugwumps. It was while singing with the Mugwumps that she met Denny Doherty, the man she would follow to the end of the earth. However, she became unexpectedly unavailable, and even though she was in love with Doherty, Cass ended up marrying one of her bandmates. In 1963, she married her Mugwumps guitarist James Harris. There was no love between the two, the marriage was just a sham to help Hendrik avoid the draft. Cass knew that her only real connection to Hendrik was through their band, so after 8 months, the Mugwumps broke up. Cass went out on her own, hoping that Doherty would follow her, but he joined the New Journeymen, a band made up of John and Michelle Phillips, a husband and wife duo. Although Doherty had turned down Cass as a lover because of her weight, he couldn't deny her talent and knew that she was the missing piece in the New Journeymen. But John Phillips didn't want Cass to join the band because, in private, he thought her voice was too deep for his arrangements, but in public, he was singing a different song. Phillips said that Cass's voice wasn't right for the New Journeymen, and behind closed doors, he was very critical of her looks. Phillips thought that Cass was just too heavy to join the group, and her already low confidence couldn't handle the truth. Throughout her life and career, Cass had to deal with society's unfair beauty standards at a time when Audrey Hepburn and other thin women were praised. Cass thought she didn't have a chance, even though John Phillips kept turning her down. Michelle Phillips says that Cass was so eager to join the New Journeymen to get closer to drug abstinence that she followed the band around everywhere they went. What they put her through was downright cruel. They treated her worse than they would have treated an annoying groupie. They ordered her around, made her serve them drinks, and even teased her by letting her practice with them but not perform. Luckily for Cass, things were about to change dramatically for the better. The New Journeymen liked to spend more money on drugs than on music, and they eventually ran out of money and had to turn to the only person they knew who would take them in. They came to Cass's house in Los Angeles because they were desperate for a place to stay. She made them an offer they couldn't refuse, and when the new worker showed up, she saw a chance to finally get what she wanted. Reports say Cass took advantage of how bad things were for the group. Whether he liked her size or not, John Phillips had to agree to let Cass into the band or sleep on the streets, but there's another version of the story of how Cass came to be in the band for years. The official story was that it was fate and not poor money management that brought Cass and the New Journeymen together. According to this version of events, Cass had accompanied the New Journeymen on a trip to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. While there, she was walking under a construction site. When a pipe fell on her head, Cass was knocked off her feet, and the supposed head injury unbelievably caused her to sing in the higher register that John Phillips had been looking for. The crazy pipe to the head story was likely just Cass's way of covering up the embarrassing truth. Decades later, sources close to the band revealed that Phillips didn't want it leaking out to their fans that he had essentially fat-shamed Cass out of joining whatever the truth. Cass was finally in the band after some late-night inspiration. They named themselves the Mamas and the Papas. Then the good times started to roll with Cass's vocals. The band recorded huge hits like California Dream on Monday Monday, but even though she was in the band, the teasing about her weight didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. John, Michelle, and Denny Phillips made fun of Cass's weight in the words of their songs. For example, in the band's hit song, Creek Alley, they wrote, "No one's getting fat except Mama Cass." Fans liked the mean lyrics, and although Cass didn't like the name Mama Cass, it stuck. Then one of her friends did something inappropriate. Cass joined the Mamas and the Papas because she loved Doherty but didn't feel loved back. Sadly, while Cass was hurting over him, he was lusting after someone else. In fact, the person she loved had started an affair with the person she was jealous of. Michelle Phillips. When Doherty told her that he was having an affair with Phillips, Cass was left utterly heartbroken and full of envious rage. The betrayal left her crestfallen. She lamented to Phillips, "You can have any man in the world, why take the one man I love?" Even after Doherty had told Cass about the affair, she still held out hope that one day he might grow to love her. Decades later, Dee revealed that Cass had proposed to him one night, but that he hadn't answered because he'd been too intoxicated. She buried her woes with the Mamas and the Papas into her music, and a dangerous amount, an array of substances, which led to some wild music behavior. In 1967, Cass traveled to London ahead of her bandmates for a scheduled performance, but before long she found herself on the wrong side of the music law. The local London authorities detained Cass for having pilfered bed linens from the apartment she was staying in. There were rumors, however, that they really wanted her for something far more. Music. One of Cass's many alleged lovers was a man named P.C.K. Dawson, but she wasn't the only one interested in him. The local authorities were too. Dawson was not only Cass's supplier, but also possibly her lover. The London authorities wanted to use the accusations against Cass to get to Dawson. She spent the night in jail in London, possibly facing serious charges, but after she appeared before the magistrate, the charges were dropped for lack of evidence. However, the bad press caused the band to cancel their performance, and Cass's time with the Mamas and the Papas was over with a broken heart and insulting lyrics to show for it. Cass thought about moving on after the success of her EP Dream a Little Dream of Me. Soon after the Mamas and the Papas broke up, Cass went out on her own. She quickly got a big gig at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, a 3.5-figure deal that would have made her the breakout star from the broken-up band now that she was a single act. Because she was getting ready for her big Las Vegas launch, Cass felt more pressure than ever to lose weight. She went on a crazy crash diet and fasted 4 days a week for 7 months. She lost 1/3 of her 300 pounds, but unfortunately, the effects were painful. The diet made her slim down a lot, but in a cruel twist, it came at a terrible cost to her health. In the weeks before her first Las Vegas show, Cass got acute tonsillitis, mononucleosis, and a dangerous case of hepatitis. All because of her bad new eating habits. She wasn't ready for what was to come. Music, next. Big stars like Sammy Davis Jr., Jimi Hendrix, and Mia Farrow came to see her debut, but she hadn't practiced a single lyric because of her health. When Cass finally went on stage for her first show, she left the crowd. The star-studded crowd was excitedly anticipating Cass's debut as a solo artist. She took the stage nervously and stumbled her way through the performance. She was so sick that her voice could barely be heard. Cass's deal said she had to do 2 shows a night. After a short break, she tried to save the show with her second performance, but her voice got worse and the crowd became less interested. The upset crowd walked out in a loud protest, and Caesar's Palace had no choice but to cancel Cass's contract. To make matters worse, they made things worse when the sun came up and showed how bad her performances were. The media didn't forgive. Newsweek compared Cass's debut in Las Vegas to the sinking of the Titanic. She fell into a deep depression, but there was one bright spot in her music life. She had just given birth to a healthy baby girl named Owen, just before she signed her contract in Las Vegas. As a child, Cass was very protective of her daughter and even fired nannies who got too close to protect her reputation and her child's privacy. She kept the news out of the headlines, and when the media found out about her child, she refused to name the father, which didn't stop them from making wild guesses. There were even darker rumors about Cass throughout her career. She hosted famous Hollywood parties with all the biggest stars, as well as some terrible ones. According to legend, she hosted at least one time the notorious cult leader Charles Manson and his followers at her home. It's not clear how close she was to Manson, but it was close enough to make some people look at her differently after Manson's horrible and brutal massacre. John Phillips pointed the finger at Cass, saying she was to blame for letting Manson and his followers join their group. He even blamed Cass for the brutal murder that killed Sharon Tate. Luckily, the police didn't agree with Phillips's assessment of her Las Vegas failure. Cassie's solo business stopped, but she spent the next few years making regular TV appearances and even had her own variety shows. In her heart, Cass wanted more than just a mediocre career. She wanted the one thing that had always eluded her, love. When she least expected it, she found it in 1971, Donald von Venman, a journalist and heir to a Bavarian barony. It's not clear how they met, but it must have been love at first sight and divorce at second sight, because after just 2 months of marriage, the marriage was over as quickly as it had begun. Cass Elliot continued her dangerous dieting habits, but by 1974 it caught up with her while waiting backstage at the Johnny Carson show. She unexpectedly collapsed. Medical staff rushed her to the hospital, but she waved the incident away as mere exhaustion. My blood sugar level dropped or something and I just sort of tipped over, but everything was okay. Yeah. Everything was fine. She ignored the warning signs of her waning health after her collapse at the Johnny Carson show. She wrapped up 2 weeks of concert at the London Palladium. Then, without taking so much as a catnap, she kicked off her post-show celebrations with Mick Jagger's 31st birthday party at his place in Chelsea. Cass left MC Jagger's party and went to a brunch hosted by Georgia Brown. In her honor, however, much to everyone's dismay, Cass appeared unwell, blowing her nose, frequently coughing, and having trouble breathing. Nevertheless, later that evening she went to another party hosted by the American entertainment journalist Jack Martin. Her appearance there, however, left everyone, music, confused. Wherever she went, Cass was always the life of the party. At Martin's party, however, life appeared to have left her. Even though everyone commented that she seemed to be in good spirits, everyone was worried about her because she looked so sick. Again, Cass said it was because she was tired and chose to go home for the night. It would be her last public appearance. Cass returned home to an apartment owned by Harry Nelson in the affluent Mayfair neighborhood. However, when Cass failed to emerge from her room the next day, her secretary became suspicious. When he finally opened her bedroom door, he was left devastated. He found her lifeless in her bed. She died of an apparent heart attack, but predictably the rumor mill concocted its own version of events. Before long, everyone was viciously reporting that Cass had choked while eating a ham sandwich, an obvious smear against her long-standing struggle with obesity. 4 years later, The Who drummer Keith Moon also died in the same bedroom, also at the age of 32. After her passing, Cass's daughter went to live with the singer's younger sister Leah. It wasn't until years later, however, that Michelle Phillips of all people finally solved the mystery of Cass's unknown lover and Owen's music father. The father was Chuck Day, the second guitarist on hit songs Monday Monday in California, Dreaming. In October 2022, Cass was given a posthumous and long overdue star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, attended by her family and friends, including her mama's and papa's bandmate Michelle Phillips. In a time when fat phobia was so normalized that people would make degrading comments right to her face in front of millions of people, Cass had always had a harder time than most people getting noticed for her talent and being taken seriously. Here's a big lady who is bigger in the US than she is here. To show how strong and present her voice was, when the Mamas and Papas got together again for their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998, they sang California Dreaming, but they had to use 3 backup singers to try to make up for Cass's absence. If you liked this video, please like it and subscribe for more videos.